Welcome, everyone. Welcome to all of you here in the building and to all of you joining us online today. And nice to see John joining us again online, and also Erna. But all of you, everyone is welcome. It's all right, question. As always, you are welcome however you find yourself today, whether you come with anxiety or whether you feel calm, whether you feel curious, whether you feel joyful or sad, whatever it is you come with today is welcome here. We come to create sacred space together, and that means bringing the whole of ourselves. Just going to share some words from Janet Morley, who has compiled a couple of different anthologies, one for Advent, but one also for Lent, in which she includes poems, but also some really interesting thoughts about them. But in her introduction to the book, The Heart's Time, which is a poem a day for Lent and Easter, she writes this: "To keep Lent is to turn aside from the ordinary routines of our life in order to reflect, to notice what is going on, to detect what is really significant. It is to attend properly to what seems insignificant and might otherwise be missed, but is actually indicative of the whole direction of our unconscious priorities, so that these can be reconsidered. It is consciously to take a slice out of ordinary time so as to understand how we use time overall." So as this is the first Sunday in Lent, I thought we might take the opportunity to reflect on what it might mean to us to turn aside, to attend to what seems to be insignificant, and to understand how we use time, or could use time, to strengthen our connection with all that is. But I shall begin, as always, by lighting our chalice candle. It's the symbol we use for our free religious faith. And also, as always, I invite those of you watching online to light a candle wherever you may be. May this flame invite us into sacred time and gently hold us here together in the light of the Divine Spirit. Now, our first hymn may be familiar to some of you, but it was actually a new one for me, and our friend John Wilkinson has made the usual video for us. I don't know whether you will know it, but I chose it because I really like the words. I felt it said something about what it is we try to do here. It's called With Heart and Mind. And just do your best with it, really. You may not be familiar with the tune, but you know, there will be a choir underneath you, so you're not too exposed. It might be helpful to know that the tune of the first two lines is the same as the tune for the next two lines. So the first and second lines have the same tune as the third and fourth lines, and then the fifth and sixth lines are a little bit different, just to catch you out. But let's give it a go. It's hymn number 218 in the Purple Hymn Books, With Heart and Mind. They're nice words, aren't they? Yeah. And having just sung Where Every Door is Open Wide, I'm going to ask maybe Caroline, as you're nearest the back, would you mind closing the door at this point? Thank you. We're going to come to a time of prayer now. And I know that Lent can be associated with a sort of gloominess. And perhaps you might think of it as a rather joyless period of abstinence, whether or not you observe that. But I thought I would share words by Pope Francis, who offers a different slant on what it might mean to fast at this time. Lent is often associated with a fast of some sort. What might you fast from, if anything at all? But so I'm using this as a prayer to lead us into prayer as well. So at this season, may we fast from hurting words and say kind words. Fast from sadness and be filled with gratitude. Fast from anger and be filled with patience. Fast from pessimism and be filled with hope. Fast from worries and have trust in God. Fast from complaints and contemplate simplicity. Fast from pressures and be prayerful. Fast from bitterness and fill your heart with joy. Fast from selfishness and be compassionate to others. Fast from grudges and be reconciled. Fast from words and be silent so you can listen. Let us be silent now and allow ourselves to be present here in the quietness. And may we allow anyone known to us who is in pain or suffering of any kind at this time to just gently come into our hearts and our mind's eye. And you may like to envision them bathed in light and love, and wish for them comfort and peace. And may we open our hearts more widely to all those beloved souls who are unknown to us, wherever they may be in the world. We think of those who are unwell, whether in body or mind, those who may be grieving, those living in fear, in war, in poverty. And you may like to envision light and love from your heart rippling out towards all living beings. As you wish them solace, freedom, healing, peace. Blessed be. And now we have a short story which Viv is going to read for us, and it's by Rabbi David Wolf. Thank you, Viv.
A boy and his father were walking along a road when they came across a large stone. "Do you think if I use all my strength, I can move this rock?" the child asked. His father answered, "If you use all your strength, I am sure you can do it." The boy began to push the rock. Exerting himself as much as he could, he pushed and pushed. The rock did not move. Discouraged, he said to his father, "You were wrong. I can't do it." The father put his arm around the boy's shoulder and said, "No, son, you didn't use all your strength. You didn't ask me to help."
Thank you, Viv. And a reading from the Christian writer Richard Rohr, who says there are two moments that matter. One is when you know that your one and only life is absolutely valuable and alive. And the other is when you know your life as presently lived is entirely pointless and empty. You need both of them to keep you going in the right direction. Lent is about both. The first such moment gives you energy and joy by connecting you with your ultimate source and ground. The second gives you limits and boundaries and a proper humility. So you keep seeking the source and the ground, and not just your small self. Our second hymn is number 21, Come and Find the Quiet Centre.
Space where
and a poem. This poem is by R.S. Thomas, a Welsh poet, called The Bright Field. I have seen the sun break through to illuminate a small field for a while, and gone my way and forgotten it. But that was the pearl of great price, the one field that had treasure in it. I realize now that I must give all that I have to possess it. Life is not hurrying on to a receding future, nor hankering after an imagined past. It is the turning aside, like Moses, to the miracle of the lit bush, to a brightness that seemed as transitory as your youth once, but is the eternity that awaits you. Life is not hurrying on to a receding future, nor hankering after an imagined past. I think we usually think of the past as receding and the future as imagined, don't we? So Thomas turns that idea upside down, which is interesting because he sees how we imagine the future. Somehow the future is always ahead of us. We're never actually there. So the future is always going forwards. We're not in it. But also the past is also, in a way, imagined, reimagined. We constantly reimagine the past. Its memories and its a point of view and its other people's remembrance and all sorts of things get mixed up in it. So again, there is imagination there too. But in the present, which I think is the point he's trying to make, this is where we live. This is where we are. This is what's real, neither receding nor imagined. And that idea of somehow we miss it. And he urges us to pay attention to it, because that is in that reality, in this reality of now, is where we feel the presence of the divine, and where we can feel completely at home with ourselves too. So let's come now to a time of quiet reflection and contemplation. I did call this service the art of contemplation, which sets the bar rather high. I don't know whether it's quite the art of contemplation that I'm sharing, but certainly something about contemplation. So when we come here, we get the chance to practice these things. We get the chance, the opportunity to turn aside a little from our ordinary lives and just refocus ourselves, turn our attention slightly differently. So I invite you in the time of silence that you might choose something to focus on. It could be the chalice candle, it could be flowers on the table. If you're at home, it could be anything that you can currently see, a flower or a candle or something outside the window. Could be just your breathing, could be anything you like. Doesn't matter what it is. But the invitation is to turn your attention towards it and contemplate it. And the contemplation, I'm not so much thinking about thinking thoughts about it. It's really about being with, sitting with, opening yourself to whatever might be revealed to you. And when you find that your attention has wandered, which it will, almost inevitably, that doesn't matter. You just gently return to the subject of your focus. Try to do it without judgment. So if you're watching your breathing, you don't need to worry about whether you don't think it's deep enough or this or that enough. Or you can let those kind of judgments fall away. You're simply being with. Nothing to force, nothing to achieve, except to bring your attention for a minute or so into the silence. And then we'll have some music. So I wonder what Lent means to you, if anything. I don't think we're about to go off into the desert, the wilderness for 40 days, any of us, as Jesus did. And we're not monastics whose rhythms are determined by liturgy and ritual. We live in the so-called real world. So I'm guessing that whether or not you think of yourself as a Christian, your usual routine and busyness is likely to continue. In all probability, very much as usual. Our ability to turn aside from ordinary routines in our own lives in order to reflect is always, I find, somewhat limited. Although it can sometimes feel easier to, rather than turn aside, to turn toward, have the idea of turning toward. But to what and how? So I was wondering about this and how to talk about what contemplation might be today. And I suddenly remembered something that I used to do as a child, and I don't know whether you've ever done this or do this. I used to sometimes just repeat, I don't know why, but I used to sometimes just repeat a word over and over and over until it meant nothing. Have you ever done that? It's quite interesting to do it. The more you say a word over and over and over, I suppose it's like a mantra in a way. It's the original meaning of it just falls away and it just becomes a sound. So for example, with a little word, let's say a word like hello, does. A word like does as in D-O-E-S, doesn't mean much on its own, does it? Does it? But you know what it means. You know how we use it. We say, yes, it does matter, or no, it doesn't matter, or so-and-so always does their accounts on time. We use it happily enough, but when you think about it on its own, it doesn't mean a lot. So if you keep saying it, does, it just sort of, it's just a sound. So I used to do that kind of thing. So when you take a word out of context and repeat it, the meaning, of course, is all about the context of our language. A word on its own doesn't carry that much. And then you start to think about how you're making the sound, or I do anyway. Does, it's one syllable. And yet it's quite complicated in its way if you think about it. If you say it, you've got to make the duh sound. So you notice where your tongue goes, the roof of your mouth, just behind the teeth, duh. And then the oh, you've got to sort of move your throat back a bit to get the ah. And the S, it's not really an S, it's more like a Z, I think, or somewhere in between, does, z. That's a strange sound to make as well. You can start to become quite fascinated with what the sound is and how you actually make it. And it's quite a simple little exercise. I invite you to do it now. To just say does over to yourself a few times and just notice what your mouth does, what your tongue does, what your jaw does as you do it. I know you're going to feel stupid, but don't worry about that. Just be curious for a few moments of just repeating a word. You can do it quietly. You can make as much noise as you like if you're at home, of course. Does. When you get home, you can try it with any word and see what happens. And just be curious about what it is. And I think this is, I mean, you might think I've slightly lost the plot here, but the reason I'm doing this is because I think it illustrates how you can just pick something really tiny, something very, very ordinary and familiar, and still find something else in it. And part of the finding something else and something new in it is letting go of what you already thought it was. Just sort of letting that fall away. So rather than thinking about the meaning of the word that we know and we use and any assumptions we might have about it, just sort of letting that fall away. And in contemplating it, we become curious and interested and just open to whatever we notice, which can be tiny little details. In some ways, the tinier the details, perhaps the better. And so I think this is what we do when we contemplate. This is the art, if you like, of contemplation. It is approaching something familiar, often, with no preconceptions. That's actually quite difficult to do because we have a lot of preconceptions. We have a lot of assumptions that we bring to another person, that we bring to any situation, that we bring to all the little details of our lives. And of course we have to do that because if we contemplated everything, we'd never get out of bed in the morning. So that's part of how we survive in life. But to be able to sometimes just let that rest for a bit and simply contemplate is a really valuable thing to do. And when you do it, it's just possible that you'll notice something else, that there's another mysterious something that enters in. If you sit with a flower or a word or a candle flame or whatever it is, after a while of simply contemplating, simply being open, you may begin to feel either that you and the flower or the candle are somehow one thing. You may feel really sort of an intimate connection with it. You may also feel that there's almost something else there, another presence, another dimension. There's that sense of mystery and spirit that can be there when you make the space for it. And this is about making the space for it. I don't know what you would call that other dimension. You might call it all sorts of things. You could call it a kind of sense of meeting, where you really meet something. You might call it a seeing, where you really truly see what it is. A beholding, maybe. An opening, a letting go. We might call it love. You might call it God. Or you might not label it at all. You may simply sit and notice it. So we human beings, of course, we are natural meaning makers. We spend all our time making meaning out of things. We make comparisons and we draw conclusions and we ask questions and we remember things and we learn things, and that's all amazing and brilliant. But everything in moderation, as my mother used to be fond of saying, and everything has a downside if taken to extremes, I think. And the downside of our incredible gymnastic, overactive brains is that they can completely take over. And they can fill us up with all sorts of, sometimes wonderful things, sometimes not so wonderful things. Sometimes just nonsense, really. And a lot of worries and a lot of anxieties, as if they just can't bear to stop working for a moment. And yet, if we give them the chance, if we give our minds just the chance to stop, every now and again, ideally every day, if we can, just to allow all of that to stop for a moment. We do have this other side to us, in which our minds don't have to be thinking all the time, not all the time. You can always come back to that. But just to create this space and this opportunity for insight, for real meeting, for real being, and for real connection. One of the pillars of Unitarianism, one of the things we say about it is that we are constantly open to new revelation. And being open to new revelation, I suppose you could say, is the opposite of dogma. So rather than having a fixed set of ideas, we may well have plenty of ideas, but the sense of them being fluid and open, and of having a willingness and an intention to remain open to new revelation from whichever source it may come. And I think that this practice of contemplation is one of the ways in which we open ourselves up to the possibility of new revelation, even in the tiny things. So I see Lent as an opportunity to remember once more this deeply spiritual need that we also have within us, to take a little time for contemplation. And as I've said, the revelations might be tiny. You won't necessarily suddenly get a great understanding of the entire meaning of life. Don't be disappointed if that doesn't happen. The shifts are tiny. The little different perceptions might be really small, but together they build, they add up, and they give us something other than what we like to call our ordinary daily life. Open us up to something which is stranger and more wonderful than our minds even can ever fully grasp. Linking back to the story that we heard earlier, that Viv read for us, that short story, which I think was really about remembering that we're not on our own. We don't have to do anything on our own, that there's always help, and I do believe that there is always help. And we see that time and time again in the kindness and generosity of others. But in order to receive help, you have to be open to receiving help, willing to receive help. And that involves being vulnerable, really. It involves admitting that we don't know everything, we can't do everything on our own. It involves dropping some of our defenses. It involves being willing to open ourselves up to other people. And the practice of contemplation, I think, helps us with that. It's a softening. When you contemplate something without preconception, you're basically admitting you don't know them. You're saying, I'm here, I'm open. I don't know you. I want to know you. And that is a kind of softening of our boundaries and a softening of our harder, maybe, armour that we wear, that I think helps us open our minds and open our hearts to others. And it invites that ineffable presence, which we can't really name and can't really understand. It invites revelation, and it invites our healing, our own healing. It invites the oneness. It invites the Spirit. It invites God. It invites us to be here, at home, now. So do take a moment to go home and sit and contemplate. And if you want to pick a word and say it over and over again till it means nothing to you, then do that too. Let's sing our third hymn, which is in the Green Hymn Book, if you're using a hymn book. It's number 146, and it's called True Simplicity, which of course is, I suppose, also part of the contemplation. It is paring things back to simplicity. It is the gift to be simple. It is the gift to be free. Let's sing.
To
comes round right in the end. The closing words are by Joyce Rupp. Joyce Rupp's words are really a prayer, I would say, a prayer to close. Trusted and wise companion, remind me often that you accompany me. You are near as I walk through each part of the great circle I call my life. You guide me lovingly as I go on my way, as I seek the treasure hidden within my depths. Strengthen and renew my hope daily. I open the door of my heart to you. I open the door. Blessed be.